everyone, and welcome to the next installment of the HR Tech Groovers. We recently caught up to chat about the best of breed tech versus all-in-one solutions, and we've had some great feedback, so we thought we'd explore this in a bit more detail. That's why this week, HR Tech Groovers are joined by the one and only Chris Smith, Senior Account Executive for Gloat, a best of breed talent marketplace solution, which according to Josh Burson, is a front runner in the talent market. Chris has an extensive background in HR tech with some well-known brands, including Workday, Sitecore, and now Gloat. It's great to have you join us, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Jane. It's great to be here and to see the three of you again, and I really appreciate the invite.
So, Chris, just before I guess we get into the Gloat piece, could you tell us what you mean by a talent marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, a talent marketplace really represents a new talent operating model, and it's essentially delivered by a technology SaaS platform that's AI powered. And what it does is it allows companies to break down the silos that exist within their business so that they can be a lot more agile and move at the pace that they need to these days. And for employees, a talent marketplace allows career development to be democratized, so work to be broken down so that they can have access to a lot more opportunities and build meaningful careers.
That sounds great. And I guess what problem is Gloat helping organisations solve for?
Yeah, we've realised that for decades, for hundreds of years, companies have operated in a manner where each department or business unit kind of operates and owns their own talent, and they're utilising their talent for their own tasks. And employees have kind of been treated as resources that are really just focused on what they're hired to do. And any attempt to look outside the box and cater for their own development ambitions or goals really hasn't been there, or it's just been for a select few. So what's happened is, these kind of siloed business units are only able to move as fast as they've been able to hire the talent to do these jobs. So Gloat pioneered the two-sided talent marketplace back in 2015 to really cater for these problems. And so, just like any marketplace, you've got your supply and your demand. So the supply is the employees creating the profiles with their skills and their capabilities and their aspirations. And then you've got on the other side the demand, which is your hiring managers, your project owners, HR, your talent teams, and they're the ones creating opportunities which represent the different needs within the business. And Gloat's AI basically drives the matching of the supply and demand. So what you're getting there is that the manager's getting access to talent across the organisation really quickly, and employees are getting access, as I said before, to all these opportunities, whether they be projects, whether they be new full-time roles, or they can be mentorships, they can be learning experiences or gigs, stretch assignments, etc. So, it's the data that comes from the platform really helps provide that visibility, which is one of the challenges. And I think, that the pandemic has shown the need to adapt and evolve to crazy market dynamics. And so the companies that have been able to embrace the use of technology and the agile ways of work have not only survived, but they've thrived over the last 12 or 18 months. So I think, solving for that need for agility, it's not going to go away. And companies that adapt to that new ways of working, is really critical. And on top of all that, addressing, what some experts call the turnover tsunami of supply, which is lower than ever when it comes to talent. So, it's creating a lot of pressure on businesses to keep engaged. So we're addressing a lot of those things. And I think when we look back on, in a couple of years' time, we look back on what's happened over the years, the companies that have been able to adapt and break down the old school silos and old ways of working will be the kind of companies that really win. And they'll be the kind of companies that have very engaged employees that want to stay and want to be involved.
Yeah, and I think it really challenges that whole defined career path as well, right? It gives you the opportunities to maybe seek out opportunities that you may not have normally actually gone for, which I think is amazing.
Absolutely, and I think it's extraordinary that a lot of organisations really struggle to have the visibility of their people, the skills of their people, and so that's difficult enough as it is today. Let alone preparing for the future of work and what it needs to look like next year, in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So to be able to address and provide the pathways for upskilling and development, I think is key. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of examples around. Having that speed and agility within your workforce. There's an example of a customer of ours in Unilever, and the CEO, Alan Jope, talked at his earnings call in February this year and middle of last year as well, in 2 earnings call, how they'd use Gloat to unlock 500,000 hours across 4,000 projects just over the last 12 months. So just to be able to move that quickly when aspects of their business were in low demand, and move those people, redeploy those people to areas of high demand is really critical.
That's great. I guess one of my other questions would be, how does this, I guess, feed into the traditional talent processes like the 9-box?
Yeah, I think the traditional performance management processes still have their place, but we've taken a very different approach intentionally to move away from the bias that humans can create when rating themselves. I mean, it can be a tricky kind of situation. So, first of all, you have to have a very clearly defined framework of what's a 3 out of 5 mean, or what does a 4 out of 5 mean. And I think, the human bias often influences the ratings. Certain demographics can underrepresent their skills and some can overrepresent their skills. So, there's a challenge there. So Gloat designed a platform to allow the AI to determine the proficiency score for each skill that you see within a profile. And, so that's really creating a level playing field rather than a human weighing in on what that looks like. And when you think about it, what's Gloat? 6 years old, and it's made up of tens of thousands of job profiles and millions of candidate profiles. And the AI has been able to establish a network of relationships between a position and a skill and an inferred skill. So we're very accurately able to determine whether someone's a beginner or an intermediate or advanced in a variety of skills. And that's what the software, that's what Gloat's driving that, rather than having that human bias.
I think that bias piece is a really interesting point. And Sam, but I know you've done a lot of work in that bias space as well over time, and I think it is actually something I think we've talked about previously in terms of one of our previous podcasts. Chris, it's great to have you. I'm particularly interested in some of the comments you were making around, and I was reflecting on, typically in talent, you're often either building, buying, or borrowing, and it certainly sounds like Gloat allows you to really build that talent capability and borrow. One of the things that I've often seen over the years has been some managers' reluctance in sharing talent, probably unnecessarily so and a little bit unfairly, to be fair. How have you typically seen Gloat overcome some of those challenges that organisations may have had when it's come to sharing of talent within their organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. Talent hoarding. It's a natural human instinct, I suppose. When you've got something good, you don't want to give it up. But when it comes to deploying a talent marketplace, it's absolutely one of the biggest considerations. And I think that's where the experience of Gloat is so valuable, for companies looking to invest in a talent marketplace, because we've done this so many times on very large scales. So whether it's a Nestle or a Walmart or a Standard Chartered Bank, etc. So what we've found over the years is that the change management is key, and it's actually part of our service. So part of that is having the executive stakeholders messaging and being across this. It's an absolute must, but also educating the managers around really what's in it for them, because when they know that it has to be an outstanding user experience, and once they experience that, once they start to get the visibility across the enterprise and get access to talent in literally seconds, they can sort of start to understand the power of the platform and how it can help them do what they need to do. And we've actually found that when managers realise that, it really helps things. And they also realise that the employees, their employees in their team, are much happier and they're much more engaged because they're contributing, across in the areas that they want to develop and in the sort of experiences that they want to have, and they're benefiting it. So that's a key aspect, is around that change management. And there's a great example actually of Schneider Electric's CHRO Tanuj Kapil-Sharami, and she was interviewed with Gloat recently, and she was talking about the impact on the employee experience on this very thing. And she was saying at the start there was huge skepticism as to whether this kind of talent marketplace would work, because people were saying, oh, well, to use us as an example, if Josh signs up for Jane's gig, does he get more money? And the answer is no. And does Josh get more credit in his scorecard, or does he get a bonus? It's no. And, does Josh need his manager's sign off? And the answer is no to all those questions. And then it's like, well, why would anyone do that? And the reason why they knew people would do it is because they'd done the research and they knew that their employees value their employment proposition very much. They know that they keep their top talent because they really value what they put into their proposition around development, around growth, and the opportunity to make an impact. So that was kind of their insights, and that's how they addressed that very aspect of talent hoarding.
I think it's such a really good point, Chris, that you talk about both the change management. I love that term, talent hoarding. I think that's a really, I've seen that in some organisations, and I think your point around how I just think some of those examples you've shared, and particularly even that stat around with Unilever and the number of hours is, you certainly can't achieve that without a really strong buying and messaging positioning. So, which is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I want to move on to one of the questions that we had around fit within existing technology stack. As Jane mentioned at one of our previous podcast discussions, we talked a lot about best of breed versus all-in-one solution. Just curious around how Gloat fits within, say, an organisation's existing technology stack.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did my homework as well. And I agreed with what you said in that last podcast around, I think Sambit was talking about user experience and, speaking to existing customers, and Jane's point was around, what systems do you have now before you choose whether you go down a best of breed. So, I agree with all those things. And my point about a talent marketplace is that it's not a light add-on feature. It's probably the most technologically sophisticated layer of the HR tech stack. And it's not something that just a few of your recruiters touch or a few of your learning team touch. And if you compare the utilization rates of Gloat versus other key aspects to the HR tech landscape, Gloat has at any one point in time has an 80% profile completion across all customers at any point in time, which is huge, and also has a 40% plus monthly active users, which is in the sort of area of like your LinkedIn. So it's highly used, and it's because it touches employees, managers, HR, talent team, leadership. And it really, needs to engage the support of all those stakeholders to be successful. So if there's a single solution that you'd want to buy a best of breed platform, it's absolutely a talent marketplace.
Thanks, Chris.
Great. Chris, Sambit here again. Thanks for joining in. Really interesting chat. I was intrigued by your comment on, the silo talents and using the talents across departments and not just, the traditional way. And I guess COVID has tested all of that big time over the last, 18 months or so. And, you have job roles getting redundant suddenly, and then new job roles created for our people. And, how I'm very interested to know how does, the management of talent, how does that change, or how you've been seeing that changing over the COVID-19 era?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, there's been a lot of change. We've had to change. There's, I mentioned before around the supply and demand is a challenge at the moment. And I think a lot of people are talking now about the great tsunami and the great resignation. I know Gloat's doing a podcast coming up. If you Google the Great Resignation, and Gloat is a terrific podcast. And I think, what we're seeing is that the connections between employees and employers have definitely eroded during the pandemic. And there was a survey last month in June that said that 95% of employees are considering leaving their jobs, hence the Great Resignation theme, and 79% say that they're disengaged at work. So, this is a real challenge. And as we try and come out of the pandemic, these are the things that we need to think about. So, the thinking is, what are companies doing right now to maximize the retention of their top talent? And, even 1 year of unusually high turnover can have a huge effect. So, having the knowledge and experience of your people is the most valuable thing in a company. And so, I think that's a critical area. How set up today are companies to deal with this and to present every one of their workers with interesting opportunities internally that's going to keep them engaged and keep them sticking around. And, if you haven't started thinking about that sort of things, I think it's definitely the time to do so, for sure.
Thanks, Krish. And I also, you also mentioned about the use of AI quite a lot, and I am very, interested and excited in that field, of course. And one of the things you mentioned also was to match the supply with the demand, and how that, the AI engine is helping to read through the natural language of the job profiles, and then understanding whether the person is an expert or an intermediate or a beginner. And I also saw on your website, your Gloat is already using neural networks and, the BERT language model, which is, the state of the art one. And I wanted to just a little bit, take your inputs and a little bit more around how Gloat is applying AI, in harnessing the talent and deriving insights out of the data.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Gloat uses AI and deep learning and as you say, NLP to basically analyze the proficiency and depth of each employee's skill. And what it does is it assigns a score between 0 and 5 that's used as part of that matching. And we hide that, obviously, to avoid the human bias. So what it does is it analyzes each skill. It looks at the number of times in which the skill was used and how long ago and for what period of time the skill was used. And it also, part of the process is to consider the related skills and what capacity the skill was used, how the employee describes their experience with the skill and things like that. And so it as I said, one of the benefits of Gloat, or advantages with Gloat, is that it's seen a lot of skills and a lot of experiences. And as we know, AI learns over time. And so with 6 years of learning, Gloat has a very, very good understanding of these relationships. And I suppose that's part of the key of what Gloat does.
Chris, it's been so good having you come along today. I feel like every interaction I ever have with you, I walk away and learn something, Chris, which is, I think,
vice versa.
Oh, thank you. And I was reflecting on, before we came, I was thinking about all the, talent at its most fundamental is about attracting, motivating, and retaining key people within the organization. And as you were just talking about that, I was really thinking about, the power that a tool like Gloat really has. Your point around EVP is a really good one. It's not just about once they're in the organization, how are you developing and growing? If I knew that an organization had a tool like this that allowed for internal opportunity for its employees, that's a pretty cool sell in a market that is hot for good people to join it. Motivation. Your point around being able to cycle through different opportunities and continue to grow and, put tools in your toolkit, I think is a really exciting value proposition. And I certainly can see why the Unilevers, the Nestle's, some of those examples have really had some terrific benefits as a result of some of those things. And it's great to hear, the point around how it can integrate into the technology stack really easily, that, that you also support the change management, because I think we're a big believer here that, change includes people, systems, processes, and it's terrific to hear that a key part of it. And lastly, retention. To be able to keep people in an organization motivated, engaged through these different assignments, that's really terrific sort of stuff. And, your point around all of the AI, I could just see Sambit smiling there, listening to some of those things, because it's really powerful and it's really exciting stuff to see. So thank you again for coming along and helping, really educate all of us on sort of the way some of these, bespoke and specialized systems fit within the technology strategy.
Definitely. No, thank you very much. And from my perspective, I'm quite lucky to be able to go out and speak to people about this. And there's so many great stories. I mentioned even a story like one of the ones where someone had been in R&D for 18 years and was involved in a project that was run by Gloat within her organisation. And it was a 6-week project where she spent it was a stretch assignment, 20% of her time per week on that program around diversity and inclusion. And she found that was her absolute love of what she wants to do for her career. And so after 18 years in R&D in the IT team, she moved across and she now heads up gender diversity within that organisation. So there's plenty of great stories, and it's great to talk with you guys about it and be part of it. It's definitely a lot of fun.
Oh, terrific. No, well, thanks a lot, Chris. Well, there you go, HR Tech Groovers. What a terrific conversation. And I think, obviously, so much, I really appreciated all of the time that Chris shared, and hopefully for our listeners, you also got something out of that discussion as we continue to delve into the best of breed versus all-in-one solution. So until next time, Groovers, I guess it's bye for now.